Well, Mission Creek, to me, is a place for rediscovery. It's a place for people to rediscover not only themselves through quiet contemplation, but also to rediscover their connection to nature. It's so important in this day and age, with the busyness, the hustle and bustle of society, for people to find time to reconnect with themselves and with nature, to recognize our role in the world, and so that we can re-energize ourselves to be better stewards, better people, better family members, better citizens. That's what the creek means to me. You know, when this area was colonized by the Spanish explorers several hundred years ago, they settled right here in Santa Barbara on the banks of Mission Creek. And when they did that, there were already thriving colonies of the native Chumash. And both the Spanish and the Chumash chose to live along Mission Creek because it's such a bountiful source of food and fresh water. It's a perennial stream. In fact, when the Spanish colonized, they had the Chumash build them an aqueduct all the way from what is now Botanic Gardens down to the site of the mission, about 1.5 miles downstream. So historically, Mission Creek has been just essential in the colonization and development of Santa Barbara, and that's why Santa Barbara is where it is. Well, when the Caltrans channels were built in the 30s and 60s, they were built in association with the realignment and widening of Highway 101, but they were also built as flood control channels to convey the 100-year flood, which the Army Corps of Engineers believed was 7,200 cubic feet per second of water flowing down the channel. That turned out to be an overestimate, so the channel is probably overbuilt, but it still serves the function of protecting people from flooding. Now, unfortunately, upstream and downstream from the Caltrans channels, the creek doesn't have that capacity because people have built into the channel and narrowed it. So the creek does still flood upstream and downstream pretty frequently. There are plans in the works to widen the creek in these areas where it's been hemmed in by development, but it won't be concrete channelized in those areas. But when it was built, people weren't thinking about the impact on the environment, or the fact that it would almost completely wipe out the steelhead in Mission Creek. Well, you know, steelhead is a very unique species. It can actually live as one of two different life forms. A steelhead, which like a salmon goes to the ocean, or they can live as a resident rainbow, a rainbow trout, in the creek their whole lives. Same species, but two completely different morphologies, two completely different physical forms. And they do that for a reason. It's to adapt to our very arid and fire-prone environment in Southern California. During a long drought that, say, may last more than 8 years, which is the steelhead's lifespan, all the steelhead in the ocean might perish without ever getting a chance to come up the creeks and spawn because there was a really bad drought and none of the creeks flowed enough for that to happen. If that were to occur, all the resident rainbow trout up in the creeks, up in the springs where it'll flow for many years, even with very poor rain, those fish survive and can repopulate the ocean population. The reason that the concrete channel is a severe impediment to migrating steelhead is because it doesn't have any resting areas for the fish. A natural creek bed has pools and boulders and riffles, a lot of diversity for the fish that are migrating to find areas to rest before they swim up through the next set of riffles or over the next waterfall. But in a concrete flood control channel, there are no places to rest for a fish. And in fact, it's designed so that the water just rips right out, because the whole purpose is to get the water out to the ocean so it doesn't cause flooding. Steelhead can swim fast. They're the fastest swimming fish in this part of the world, in the fresh water. Over 25 feet per second in short bursts. But they aren't fast enough or strong enough to swim through a mile of concrete channel where the water is ripping out at 20 feet per second. And also, oftentimes when the conditions would be good for steelhead to migrate, after a storm, when the flows are starting to drop a little bit, the water gets really shallow in the concrete flood control channel because it's a wide, flat, smooth concrete bed, and the water is often only several inches deep. The steelhead are 6 or 8 inches tall. Their backs would be sticking out of the water, so they need deeper water. And the concrete flood control channel doesn't provide that right now.
We have been working with wildlife agencies, both with Department of Fish and Game and with NOAA, and consulting engineers to design a project that is not going to change the flood control benefit of that facility, but is going to allow fish to pass. Right now, fish passage through the Caltrans Channel has been determined to be impossible.
What our project would do is it would create a narrower, low-flow channel, a fishway, in the bottom of the existing concrete channel. And that fishway would have resting pockets for the fish where the turbulence would below, the velocity would slow down and the fish would be able to rest periodically. And the low-flow fishway channel would also have weirs that would pond the water up in the fishway so it wouldn't be too shallow. It would be deep enough for the steelhead to migrate.
We're working on a design that's very unique, that if successful would be replicated in a lot of areas through Southern California where they've channelized the creeks and steelhead creeks. We're sort of on the forefront, on the cutting edge here in Santa Barbara of developing a very urban solution to an urban problem.
When the Talent Road Bridge was built over Mission Creek, there were some concrete structures built underneath the bridge, and those structures block the migration of steelhead. And the city of Santa Barbara is implementing a several $100,000 project to provide for steelhead passage there. So the project will actually create pools and riffles so the fish can swim up and rest in a pool and swim up and rest a series of times to get up to their spawning grounds. And the city of Santa Barbara is also looking at a project involving various partners and stakeholders, including the EDC, to restore the mouth of Mission Creek, where the creek flows out by Stearns Wharf onto the beach. There's a big lagoon, and that's a very important habitat that's degraded by pollution and adjacent developments. So the idea will be to restore the estuary or the lagoon of Mission Creek. You know, in the future, we at the Environmental Defense Center envision families with young children coming down to the creek, sitting on a rock, and watching the steelhead swim up the creek and spawn. We think that'll give people a lot of buy-in, a lot of ownership over the creek. If they can see the steelhead in their neighborhood creek, if they can come down and feel the beauty of the environment in the creek, we think that'll increase people's awareness and desire to want to protect the creek as part of their neighborhood.